Hello, everyone. Thank you so much once again for being with us for the next installment of the Transformational Life series. I am so excited. These conversations have been incredible. I'm very, very excited and also honored to share with you today's speaker, Claire. Claire Westwood, she's someone who I have known for a few years. She's an incredible person, genuinely so lovely, very interesting as well, very multi-talented, very inspirational. And so, I know that each of you watching and listening are in for a real treat. Claire, thank you so much once again for being with us. I'm so excited about this. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, thank you. What a build-up. So yeah, I'm Claire Westwood and I go by the name The Seaside CEO, which is kind of my playful, seasidey, transformational personal brand, if you like. And I am a coach in its broadest sense. I work with luminaries and visionaries and people to find their purpose and really make their unique difference in the world by being fully them to the greatest extent they can. And that is just a really exciting thing to do for the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Claire. And, watchers and listeners, again, at the end of our conversation, we will speak with you again and Claire will share even more with you about what she does and how you can connect with her. So stay tuned for that. And, in the meantime, once again, the Transformational Life series, each of these conversations have been an opportunity for myself and the speaker for us to share with you what has helped to shape them. And we're going to do that with Claire as well. Part of what fascinates me about each of our life journeys and the things that shape us as a person, but also shapes our future and what we do and how we help people, is when we go back and we look at the beginning. Each of us, we've all needed that starting point. And it's those earlier years that can often shape in very fundamental ways the people that we end up becoming.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear a bit more about you and what life was like for you when you were young, a young girl. Maybe the people around you, what your home was like. What was life like for you?
Well, it's kind of really interesting, isn't it? Because I would say I come from, a normal background, but then you hear about all sorts of people's backgrounds and it all feels normal because it's their background. So it doesn't even really mean anything anymore. So I'm English. If you're a global viewer, then I was born and raised in England, moved around different parts of England with my family. I've got 3 siblings. My parents were married and had a very long, stable marriage. So, a stable middle class home life is how I would describe it. And yeah, pretty much that really. And I think it's, it's interesting kind of with my evolution. We'll talk a little bit more about this as we go along, but a lot of people that have known me for many years, and that could be 10 years, 15 years, 45 years, whatever, are like, you're pretty much the same person. So even though I have transformed and evolved, and there's obviously been life has happened to me and for me, and I've transformed my circumstances and my situation, I think there's a real thread of continuity through it. And I certainly I don't feel very different to when I was younger. I don't feel very different to when I was a teenager in many ways, although I like to think I'm a little bit wiser. But I think ultimately my kind of personality and the things I'm drawn to, with a few exceptions, are pretty much consistent. So yeah, I could meet people that I haven't seen for a long time and they would pretty much understand who I am now, because I don't think I'm very different to who I was then, to be honest.
I love that. And I would imagine for most of us, if we really thought about it, the same would be true.
Yeah. And I think I'm having a memory, actually, the first kind of set of questions you sent, which was like, you know, imagine when you were little and how were you? And I was like, oh yeah, I asked my clients the same thing. And I think it's a really useful question, because if we get it, like our personality and our strengths and our true kind of passions and desires trained out of us at school or in our family or by work or, you know, university, like whatever we think we should be doing, we can kind of forget who we are. And I think that it's always like a really good exercise to kind of return to that and go back to that core person that you were before you knew what some of the rules were, because that's when we're at our most free and in our flow, and we're following what we love to do. And actually, if we're not told that there are rules to it, or we're not prevented from doing certain things, it's really interesting kind of what strengths we can display and what, you know, I worked as a pediatric nurse for many, many years, and I spent my life with children, and I always find it incredible that adults are really surprised that children are so incredible at a young age. And I'm like, well, they're just naturally like that. They don't need to, it's almost like there's stuff that they need to learn by observing. There's stuff that's just innately in them. And I think that comes out pretty early. And if we don't train it out of them, then that's when it carries on, you know, as a kind of passion or a strength or a real innate skill that certain children have for different types of things. I mean, I remember being at primary school, and so I must have been 9 or 10, because like in England, we leave primary school at 11 years old, or we did when I went to school. So like 9 or 10. And I remember this boy called Ben in my class. And even at 9 or 10, he was an incredible artist. Like, and we all knew it as a kid. Like, he was the kid who could draw, you know, and I don't think anyone had taught him to draw. He could just draw. And I was the kid who went home and wrote songs and shows and could sing in tune and had perfect pitch, right? And it's like, nobody taught me to do that. It was just innately in me. And yet sort of at school, we had a structured routine and we had to do certain subjects. And I was a really quick reader. And me and my best friend had like read all the books in the primary school kind of at the right level. And we were running out of books before we actually, you know, left the school. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, there's things that we're naturally good at, and there's things that we get drawn to. And I think they're always real clues to kind of what comes easy to us and what's probably innately within us. And I, having looked after thousands and thousands of children over the years, believe that, you know, there's things that we learn along the way, but there's a huge amount that's just in us when we're born.
I love that, and I completely agree as well. You know, and it reminds me so much of various things I've seen along the way. You know, something that for those viewers and listeners in the business world that often gets spoken about, it can be a business strategy to help you figure out what direction your business may go in, or, you know, a specific project, or maybe you want to do an event. And often one of the ways to help find something that's going to be a good fit for you and you'll enjoy doing is you'll be asked to think back to what were you like as a child? What were your interests? What did you find exciting and joyful? Because often, you know, as we've been talking about so far, those sort of core aspects of yourself, although, you know, it can vary a bit as you grow, those sort of the fundamental truths about yourself, and which include your passions and your interests, those don't often change significantly. You know, it's just the ways that we express it that can alter. I love that. For you as well, you know, I'm thinking that because for those who don't know, and I'm sure we'll discuss this more as the conversation goes, but for those who may not be aware, you also were involved in the acting world, you know, improv and so on. And I'm personally curious, as well as I can see how it could be of interest for viewers and listeners. I'm very interested to know how much of that was stemmed from your early childhood. I would love for the viewers to hear more about it. You know, were you always interested in acting? I happen to know some things you've shared with me, and I imagine that our viewers.
Yeah, I'm what you might call, well, it's funny because as a child I was really shy, and I was also a show-off. So it's a kind of interesting combination. I remember sometimes being crippled with shyness in social situations, and then you could put me on a stage, like when I was you know, maybe 7 or 8, you know, the star in the nativity play with a solo to sing, because I was an actress and a singer, like even at that age, and started writing my own songs and all this. So the way, I wouldn't have said I was interested in like acting as such, because as a child I didn't really have a concept, like we didn't watch movies like we do nowadays. Like, you know, cinema was a treat, and I didn't see a lot of actors acting. But what I knew was that I could write little plays and perform them. So my brother wouldn't take part, so I had 2 sisters. So I remember one year writing a musical nativity play for a cast of 3. Right, I wrote this song which my sister can still remember the words, and like we're in our late 40s, early 50s now, which was the donkeys in the stable at Bethlehem singing a song, and we and like now I look back and go, like, I just went, I'm going to do a show. Like, my grandparents are coming for Christmas, right? So I will write a show, and my sisters, they're my little sisters, they have to, my sisters will be in it, right? We're having a cast of 3 and we're going to do a musical nativity play. And this is what I mean, like, for some people they go, that's just nuts, who does that? Well, I do, right? So you see like movies on TV or like movies where a group of children will go, I just want to put on a play, and they'll draw up some sheets for curtains, and they'll make some, so I used to make costumes, write songs, direct, write the script, act, you know, like everything. It was like, I have an idea, I'll do all the pieces, I'll make sure my sisters are enrolled in it and learn the songs, and I'll boss them around until they get it right. Then we'll perform it to my grandparents, my parents will get a round of applause, and my job is done. And I was like, it wasn't a big deal for me to do that. So that's kind of where it started. Improv, I've been improvising my whole life. Like, I love winging it. You know, we've just tried to do an interview which didn't work with the technology, and I'm like, it's all fine. So we can talk a bit more about how improv itself has kind of influenced my life and business, because I think that's interesting. But I just like winging it. I like making things up. I like making people laugh. I'm always talkative. So at school, I was quite good at the subject. But what happened on my reports were, they were like, Claire gets her work done and then she just distracts everybody. Because I'm like, I'm done and I'm bored, and I'm going to make people laugh now and chit chat to my neighbour. Now, they might not have finished the test yet, but I have, right? So it was like, she can do the work, but she's distracting to everybody else. And it's kind of like, yeah, pretty much, you know, and it's interesting sort of looking back, and I look at when I was a teenager, and, you know, I did quite well at school, and I could have worked harder, but I wasn't particularly bothered about academia, and I knew as a nurse I didn't need particularly high grades. I had friends, I had a Saturday job, I had a social life, I was into music and movies, and like looking back now, I just go, I had a pretty well balanced life at that age, you know. So I was interested in a balanced life, like having all sorts of interests and being able to do, and I wasn't prepared to sacrifice kind of enjoying myself to get better grades that I didn't need anyway. So it's really interesting kind of knowing what I knew as an adult, and or looking back at certain decisions I made, going, that's pretty much the core of who I am. Like I enjoy working in my business, but I need to be out, I need to be walking, I need to go to the beach, I need to have a social life, I need to be able to meditate, I need to chill out with music. Like, it all has to fit together. So that itself is fairly consistent. So yeah, I always liked being on stage. I loved being the center of attention, but if you put me in a social situation, I could be like the most mute child there. But I think maybe the way to counteract being shy was just to turn into this kind of performer, if that makes sense. Because it's like, well, it's easy for me to perform, and I don't actually know how to do a middle thing. I can be really quiet or really loud, and I don't actually know how to do normal interaction kind of things. But, you know, I had friends, so it wasn't that I didn't know how to talk to people, but I think in big groups, I sometimes just didn't really know how to deal with it. So I just turned into a bit of a performer.
I find that so fascinating and so interesting. You know, I'm sure a lot of us, a lot of, you know, yourself and me, as well as anyone watching, listening once again, I'm sure many of us will be able to think back to, and maybe, you know in our current lives, people who come across very confident, very self-assured, but often when you get to know some of these people, you find out their own, insecurities, their own self-doubts, shyness as well. Would you say at all that becoming interested in, but also genuinely enjoying things such as, putting on plays with your siblings, playing dress up, and so on. Would that have been a way to help you with your shyness? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I don't think, well, it did help me because it got me mingling with people, but actually I just loved it. It was just a side of me that came out. And there's a lot of performers, comedians and stand-ups who are actually quite reclusive and quiet and, but they come alive when they're on a stage. And I remember because I've done a bit of stand-up comedy as well. And I remember doing a stand-up workshop a little while ago. And I'd done quite a bit of performing by then. This is a few years ago. And so we were in this pub in Nottingham in this sort of upstairs room where they used to have sort of acts, and it wasn't a stage, like a little sort of platform, sort of with a microphone on it. And the guy said, well, to get used to being on the microphone, and there was only 8 or 10 of us in the group, which is fairly normal for stand-up comedy workshops. But kind of, he said, well, I want you to all introduce yourselves, but you'll do it on the microphone because I want you to get used to using a mic. And of course, I've used a mic. I've been a singer as well, so I was kind of used to it. But we did some stuff, and we were talking about comedy and who we liked in comedy and studying comedy and comedians. And it was really exciting because I love comedians and stand-up. So I was really loving talking about this stuff with other people that were passionate about it. But we had a break, and we were talking about stuff, and this guy came over to me and he said, you've got a natural advantage here. And he said, because you light up the minute you're on there. He said, you put a microphone in your hand and something happens. And this is why I like doing live streams, because, a live video on Facebook, it's some people's idea of hell. But for me, it's like, switch it on. I know I'm talking to people. I can speak in flow. It all comes through. And it's natural and exciting for me to be in that situation, slightly on the edge, So he was just like, yeah, it's going to be a lot easier for you because something happens when you get on that stage. And I guess that's what I had when I was, the X Factor, whatever, when I was tiny. It's like I liked being in that position, and I feel very much at home in that position, if you like. Now, the challenge for me at one point was when I started as a life coach many years ago. I worked with nurses as my first client group because that was my career, and I built a company in order to help nurses. Was when I started speaking and teaching instead of performing, so it was my own words, and that was a very, very different thing. So I'd done teaching as a nurse, like teach the parents and teach other nurses, and like being a teacher of subjects. And I'd been a kind of performer where I'm kind of performing other people's words through a script. I hadn't done improv at this stage or performing my own script, but I hadn't stood there and like taught stuff that I knew before, kind of out of what I decided I wanted to teach. And so that was like another flip over was, well, I'm familiar with being in front of people in a room, and I'm used to people looking at me, but oh my God, I'm going to tell them what I think about certain stuff. And that's another leap entirely. So it was really interesting that actually being able to speak my own ideas or my own truth or my own interpretation of, happiness or goal setting or communication skills, whatever it was I was teaching. It was like, God, I've done so much performing and I'm used to being in front of people. And this is still really nerve-wracking. It's another change because it's more like showing up as me, which actually now I'm thinking about what we talked about at the beginning. It's kind of, well, maybe that was where maybe that's where I really learned that I had a lot of value as well. But, I was very comfortable as a nurse. I loved being a nurse and I was a ward sister. And I remember saying to my dad at one point, I have a little audience when I'm a ward sister because I'm very visible. I have this ward sister's uniform on, which only one person on a shift or maybe two have on. So I'm obviously the figurehead. And I have the ward full of kids and parents and doctors, and they're like my audience. And my dad was laughing. And I said, but kind of that's how I feel. I feel like I'm on stage. Because it's a very public arena being a nurse, everyone's looking at you and everybody looks at what you do and everybody notices what you do. And I think that really appealed to me in a way. So yeah, it's very interesting.
This is so fascinating for me on a personal level, as well as knowing people who will be watching and listening to this, because, everything you're sharing is so valuable. And part of what is really striking me as well is that what you've just shared, and actually what we're talking about as well, a lot of it, you could tie it into the idea of being seen, being on a stage, and how comfortable are you in your own skin. Obviously you've already shared that for you at that point, it was more comfortable for you to be on stage and seen if it was make believe. If it was something that wasn't actually, your life, you, Claire, if it was something you were prepared for as a performer, and that there was something that was very different for you when going up and just speaking as yourself, and that's something I relate to as well. I know what you mean, because I've experienced the same.
Yeah. And it wasn't that, I wasn't nervous as a performer, as a child or an adult. I've sung in bands and I've done improv, and I'm always nervous, but it's always like, once I'm out there and I get started, I will be fine. It's the waiting. It's more like the bit just before I start. So I'm always nervous, but I know that through experience that, once I get started, it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I enjoy the buzz of it, and I enjoy the feeling afterwards where it's like, I did something. I mean, the first time I did stand-up comedy, I did a couple of workshops, and then I signed up to do it in London in a couple of comedy clubs. And I thought it'd be like the back room of a pub with like 15 people watching. And it was quite a well-known comedy club that I'd never heard of because I don't live in London. And I turned up there, and literally there was like 200 people in this room, all drinking these jugs of beer. And it was a Tuesday night out, and loads of people watching new acts. There was about 12 of us, I think, new acts. And I sort of looked in this room and I was like, oh my God, I thought it'd be like 15 people. And it was 200 people the first time I did stand up. And so I did my little 5 minutes that, obviously, knowing, me, I'd been to workshops, I'd written a really good 5 minutes. I put a lot of work in, I'd rehearsed it, and I did, had my intention set for what I wanted to achieve, kind of thing. And literally I had a couple of friends with me, and I got up and did my thing on stage, and I sat down, and about 5 minutes later, I just went, oh my God, I've just done stand up, right? And I think I laughed and smiled for like a fortnight, because I was just like such a high from having done it. It's like, oh my God, I've done it. And then the following night I did it again in another pub in London. And there was a woman who, I don't talk about this very much, this is really funny. There's a woman in the audience, and she came up to me and she said, you were in the comedy cafe last night, weren't you? And I said, yeah. She said, you were really good. And I said, well, it's pretty much the same tonight. And I said, I've got a fan club. I was like, I've got a fan club of one woman. I was so excited. It was like, what's the chances of the same woman? Like, anyway, so yeah. So, I think it comes back to like, and I think this is why I'm quite a good coach as well, because I like to challenge myself. I like to do new things. I like to take risks. I've jumped out of planes, and I've walked on hot coals, and I've been down zip wires, and I've resigned from jobs without knowing what I'm going to go to. And I think if we're helping people to take courageous steps in life and to push themselves, and for people to explore who they are, we have to have done it ourselves. Yeah. Like, I have no time for mentors who are theoretical mentors anymore. Like, I've learned some really great stuff off people in universities who are experts in a subject, but now I'm on the journey I'm on, I only want to learn from people who are in the field doing it and a little bit further ahead of me. Anything else, it's like I have no time for it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And, I'm sure you're very similar. Everything I'm trained in it because it helped me at one point as well. That's part of how and why I know it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I told my clients, I ran a group program at one point, and I said, I only teach what I do and what I find useful. Like, and I only veered from that once when we were talking about, I'm doing a manifesting, this is April. I'm doing a manifesting game at the moment in my group. And I was talking about manifesting. This is about a year ago in my other group. And I said, I'm going to teach you something that so many people find useful, but I don't do it, that I think I'll be remiss if I don't teach it to you. But I just want you to know that some of you will find this really great, but I actually don't do this. I rarely teach anything I don't do. But so many of the really successful people seem to use this technique that I went, no, I'm going to go against my own rules. But that's, I think, the only time I've ever taught something that I don't actually do myself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something I wanted to ask you about, backing up a little bit. Well, they're coming to me to ask, but well, I'll ask this bit first, and then I'll go back. has having and being in integrity something that has always been important for you? Because what you're speaking about, wanting to be able to teach others what you yourself do and have experienced, that's a great example of when you are in integrity or in alignment. Is another way to put it. Has that always been important for you, or for the majority of your life, having an integrity and being in integrity?
No.
Something you ever struggled with? Yeah.
No. I think my definition has changed. And I know, like, when I first trained as a coach, it was like 15 years ago. I trained with the Coaching Academy, who were one of the first adopters in the UK for life coach training. And it was a really good program. And so obviously I was pretty new. So I was teaching all sorts of stuff to my clients and goal setting and all this that I didn't really have a huge amount of experience in, but I was new. So I was just beginning, sort of thing. And I think there's always a risk that, and I certainly know I had this at one point, is kind of, well, here's the best possible practice, knowing full well that I wasn't really doing it myself. And the more I've gone through things, the more I've gone, actually, what would work for me right now is to only do what I say, and to have that as a kind of core thing. And we can talk about this a little bit more in a minute. I don't want to get off onto another subject. Because I've been through breakdown and addiction and recovery, and that's kind of going through that process and coming out of recovery a very different person, and going, I have to show up in my business as this person that I am now, and what does that mean? And that was all part of it. So that's another big topic, but yeah, so I think it's changed as I've gone along, and the more I'm in business and the more I'm a coach, the more I see what goes on online, and certainly with social media and with Instagram and everything very glossy, and it's almost like we have to know ourselves very well not to get drawn off track. And I think it's really easy. I mean, even like a few months ago, or say last year, I was running my group, and I was just going, I'm done with running this group like this. You know, I don't want to work with this level of client anymore. I don't want to run my group like this. I can see codependency in my group, between the people and between myself and my group. Like, I needed their validation and they need my inspiration, and that's not a business. And so I was really aware that actually this is an unhealthy space that I've created, and I don't want to be in it. So I literally closed my group and took some time out. And I had to really go back to basics, as in, who am I and what do I really want to create, and giving myself the permission to create exactly what I wanted. And you were saying before we started the call about, like, some of the people you've interviewed have had real transformations, like, very recently. Well, I've been running my Manifesting Magic game. We're on day 8 now, and I've had massive things happening, and some only yesterday and earlier this afternoon. So this is an ongoing process. So anyone watching this, if you feel like, oh my God, sometimes like it's just exponential, and then other times it's a plateau, and other times you think you're going in a dip, it's all normal. That's how it happens, right? So I'm on a kind of upward exponential. But I know when we spoke a few months ago, I was pretty much in this winter plateau germination, like, I've let go of everything and I don't even know where I am, and I'm living with my mum, and I'm just kind of in limbo, but I'm doing inner healing and inner work, and I'm working with an alignment and energetic mentor, which is really just clicking some of the deeper bits into place and getting rid of some more of the clutter left over from, like, my addiction and my losses in my life. And then just, it happened that it clicked into place, and sort of about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was like, oh my God, I want to be out again. I want to be visible. I want to be connecting. And we reconnected, and I reconnected with lots of different people and started doing my own interviews. And then it's just really been this whole momentum building thing that's happened. But I think, so about integrity, so the woman that I've just been mentored by, she has a lovely definition of integrity, where she says that your thoughts, your beliefs and actions are all in alignment with your highest self. And I think that's really interesting. And I was like, oh, it's not just about being honest or about truthful or about doing what you say you're going to do. It's like the person you know yourself to be, like your highest, most glorious self. All your thoughts, all your actions and all your beliefs and everything you say, that's integrity to her. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a challenge, because I know for a fact that some of the stuff I do is not aligned with my greatest vision for myself. It's just like, yeah. So that's been quite a journey. And it continues to be a journey. Like, I still haven't got it sorted.
Yeah, that is something I would love to explore a little bit further, because it does tie in with a lot of aspects of your life journey.
Yeah.
You know, various points you've already spoken about and shared, you know, the very incredible, very different things that you've done, such as, you know, training to be a nurse, improv comedy, singing, although, you know, you could say singing, you know, it's performing, but still using different skills.
Yeah.
Very different things. And you know, you very much have transformed your life in very significant ways. So you've really had to be able to examine, who am I? What does this mean for me? Who do I want to be going forward? And your actions obviously have been maybe altered or shifted dependent on how you were feeling at that time in your life. One thing before we look at that a bit more, though, I'd like to ask you, so what do you do when you find things are feeling out of integrity, or, you know, it's something that you'd like to work on a bit more? What are some of the things that have helped you?
I think stepping away is a good one. I didn't mean to step away for 9 months. I thought it'd be a couple of weeks, but stepping away and really just, I think we can get, certainly if we're coaches or healers or online business people and mothers and nurses or any of these things where we're very much into giving and caring and healing and coaching, and it's very outward energy. There's a real power in just going, okay, I'm kind of putting the shutters down, right? Close to a business, right? And I really need to just kind of spend some time with myself, is how I'll describe it. So there's various things that I do. Walking is always a really good one for me. If my energy is feeling at all antsy, like I might be angry or frustrated or bored or just restless or just like, oh, I know there's an answer to something and I don't know what it is, then I go out and I walk and I just shift the energy through my body, and I get grounded and I look at what's on, and I talk to the people walking their dogs, and I talk to the dogs, and I'll talk to some kids, and I'll look at some nature, and I'll ask the universe. And, you know, I use the movement and the outdoors and the kind of, okay, so do I need to let go of something? So sometimes I kind of rant when I'm walking, which probably looks like I'm a mad woman, but I find that works really well. And then sometimes I'm just like, oh, I do gratitude walks, I call them. So I give gratitude, and I'm appreciating nature, and I'm appreciating where I am in my life, and I'm thanking the universe literally out loud for anything good that's going on, or just being outside and just being able to walk, or like, it doesn't really matter. So that really works, is just walking outside and being connected to all that stuff. Journaling, my brain would explode if I didn't have colored pens in my notebook. I do lots of writing.
Yeah.
I've got a really good community of people that help me. So I've got mentors and really good friends, a lot of them online, who I talk to like through Zoom or send messages to. I had an accountability buddy, or we were called that, and she was like, we spent a year pretty much supporting each other through a massive ascension that we ended up going on together, which was really interesting. So that worked really well. Somebody that she was a coach as well, and we were very skilled at just holding a space for each other and just allowing the development to take place. So that was really powerful. I've obviously hired people to help me. I've bought books, I watch videos, I watch live streams, I meditate, I listen to music, I just take myself. And what I've done recently is, so in the last 4 weeks, I've really been reconnecting. So I've done a lot of inner work, and I'm really reconnecting again outwardly and kind of tapping back into who I really am. And I go, any spare minute, it's like I put my earphones in and I listen to music now. So I'm really connecting back to my musical self. And although I'd always had music before, I'm consciously adding way more of it into my day. Like if I have 10 minutes before I do a live stream, I won't necessarily meditate or look on Facebook and, you know, post something, or, you know, anything that is like, right, I'm going to plug something in, that 2 songs worth, and I'll dance around and I'll really get immersed in it for a bit. So consciously putting more of that back into my life. When I'm learning something new that's a bit challenging and my intellect works things out and I get a solution, or I coach a client, or I write something that was a bit difficult, I work something out, like that's all fun to me. It's all kind of playing with my skills, if you like. So I think there's a lot about, you know, the more you know who you are, the more tools that you know work for you. And I have a whole load that I do a weekly review every week to see how my life's going, and I do intention setting every week, and then I do meditation every day, and at the end of the day I, you know, do gratitude and I do meditation before I go to sleep. And I, you know, in the last 4 weeks I've really got back into like I say, reconnecting with the outside rather than more inner work. And so that's been another little shift. But I think having these daily routines where I connect with myself, I connect with the world, I connect with nature, I sing and I listen to music and I look at what I eat and all this kind of stuff, it all helps me to perform at I want to say a higher level. And I don't mean that in a hierarchical way, but I can operate at my best under those conditions. So I think there's always trying. So when I was a ward sister and I was first getting burnt out a little bit, this is 20 years ago, probably just as I kind of discovered the life coaching book. And my best friend, who I've known for many, many years, said to me, you know, you haven't sung for a while. You're a really good singer. You should start singing again. I was like, oh my God, like I'd forgotten that I was this performer because I was a ward sister and I had a social life and I've been doing a part-time degree. And it's like I didn't have time for singing and acting and dancing, and I was an adult. That was the other thing. So it was sort of, oh yeah, I could start singing. So I started having singing lessons. So same way I do anything, like book some lessons and have some training from somebody. Started having singing lessons, and it was such a powerful hour in my week. So I was still a ward sister, still really busy, still had the same life, still lived in the same place. So it wasn't a massive life change. But it just reminded me of who I was. Like, oh my God, I'm a singer. Like, I'm really musical. I've got this incredible voice. I'm a performer. I like standing up and singing. And it was terrifying to start with because it was me and my singing tutor. So one-to-one singing tuition. There's nowhere to hide, right? You can't sit at the back when there's just you. And it was terrifying. Every week I'd be so scared for about a year. And then I started to realize I was actually getting really good at it. It was really nerve-wracking. Like that shy thing came out and I was like, oh my God, I have to sing like in front of her and have her look at every single little thing that I do with my body and my voice. And it was so difficult to start with, but I kept going because I went, oh my God, it's just waking up a dormant part of me. Yeah.
Would you say as well that it could have been reconnecting with the little girl that you were inside, that you held inside?
Yeah. And kind of reconnecting with my innate strengths. So I used a lot of my innate strengths as a nurse. You know, there was a lot of me that, I used to play doctors and nurses when I was little, but there was a lot of my strengths that we used when I was a nurse. It was a very, very good career for me. However, I didn't express that musical side. So it kind of tapped back into that. And then what happened, it was very interesting that one decision opened things up. So for viewers and listeners of this, one little change can lead on to a whole ripple. And I think you and I talked about this before, Christa, is like I started having singing lessons and then I went, you know, I want to actually sing in public. So I think in order to improve my confidence, because I haven't performed probably for 15 years, I'm going to take some drama classes in the evening. So I started taking drama classes in the evening as well, once a week. And I met some really good friends who I'm still in touch with now. And I discovered all types of acting. And as one of our modules, we did improv. And I absolutely fell in love with improv. So I did these evening classes. Then I joined a band because I went, right, I'm ready to sing in public. So I'm joining a band. I'm doing my singing lessons. I'm doing my acting classes. Then I start an improv group. I start going off to improv. And in the end, I went, my job is my career's getting in the way and I'm a bit burnt out with nursing. So I'm going to jump out of my career and see what else there is. And so when I was 34, I left my nursing career to see what else there was in life. And that started with singing lessons.
Wow. You know, a couple of things coming to me. One, that takes such bravery to do what, you could call the big leap, because it is literally, it's a leap of faith. You don't know what exactly the end point would be.
I used to work with nurses, and I used to do like, how is your life right now? And they used to tell me in great detail and quite often cry because they were so burnt out and frazzled with everything. And I'd say to them, what do you want instead? And they had absolutely no clue because they never thought about it. Nobody ever asked them. Nobody ever said to them, what do you actually want your life to be like? How do you want to feel every day when you get up in the morning? What fills your life? Like, what do you do? Well, what have you ever done that makes you feel joyful and free?
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. It is such a crucial component for so many of us. And yet, for a lot of the world, I would hasten, or I would say that it's something that can often just not either be lost, or it can just not be considered. Self-care, I used to work for years. I know I've shared this with you before. I worked for many years in the charity sector. In the US, it's called NGO, or nonprofit, and very similar thing. And it's a lot of these people who are drawn to what are called helping professions, or if you just feel, in your life in general, that you want to help others. It's a great trait to have, but not if it leads to you being burnt out or so self-sacrificial.
Yeah.
Putting others' needs above your own. And it's an easy trap to fall into. And obviously, it doesn't mean don't go out and help people. Just make sure that you can do it in ways that are also taking care of you. Obviously, something that can really help, and what we're also both talking about here, is when you are in those spaces or places of things aren't going right, you're going, and maybe you're starting to feel sick, maybe you're having difficulties in relationships, maybe other things are going wrong, and you find that you're in these really unhelpful life patterns.
Yeah.
Sometimes what can help is when you have people who are outside of the situation, or friends and family around you as well, saying, look, we see things aren't going well. What can we do to help? Have you thought of this? Have you considered that? How much for you did receiving support help? I'm sure it must have helped hugely. But are there, specific times in which it really, really benefited you to receive support from people?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it saved my life. Let's not be dramatic about it, but that's the truth. In my recovery, I would not be alive if it wasn't for receiving help. And I'm a savior of people. I'm like a combination between Mother Teresa and the Bionic Woman, right? Or I used to be. That's like, I have unlimited energy to save the world, and then I realized I actually don't, and I found it so hard to ask for help, or to admit I wasn't coping, or to show any sign of weakness or anything. In fact, the first time I was depressed, I didn't know I was depressed because I'd never been depressed before, and I went to see occupational health. This is when I was a nurse, and I felt a bit drained and a bit tired and a bit teary and a bit whatever. People said, are you all right? You look really pale. And I thought I was anemic. So I went over to get a blood test. And in the waiting room, there's a leaflet, have you got depression? I picked it up and I got something like 12 out of 20. And so I walked in with this leaflet. I went, oh, well, I thought it was something medical, but maybe it isn't. And then that's the first time I went to see a counsellor, employee assistance counselling through work. So I've had counselling, I've had psychiatric treatment when I've had depression a couple of times really badly. I've had coaches and mentors in business and life. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a clue what I was doing in my business. I have had a lot of help in my recovery in various types. So I tried to do a diluted version of recovery for quite some time while my life fell apart. And then I accepted that I was seriously in trouble and really needed help, and got recovery help from the health service in England, and from recovery groups, and from healers, and from like all sorts of people that I could tap into. And ultimately, so my life was saved by the fact that I went, okay, I take this seriously now, and I'm actually going to go and receive proper help and healing. It's not my job to give anything to anybody right now. It's just my job to receive and to get better. And that's my job. So that's been a big learning for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are all grateful that you did receive
Well,
support. Yeah.
None more so than myself, I have to say.
Absolutely. You know, and on the flip side as well, I'm just thinking while you've been sharing that, you know, in receiving support can be really helpful as well for the happier, for the good times as well.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm curious for you, because for instance, you know, I'm a bit of a film nerd, you could say, a film geek, and I love watching interviews with people who are in the entertainment industry in general, you know, of many different fields. And something they often speak about is how much receiving support from their friends and family help them in pursuing their goals and their dreams.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling your answer for this will be to say that also helped you, but I would love to hear more about how, and yeah, how specifically.
Yeah, I think here's what I will say up front about this, that friends and family are a vital source of support, except when they're not, right? And we can only expect them to be who they are. So it comes back to the whole, who are you asking for what kind of help? I think that's really important. That's something I've learned. Like, if I want positive feedback on a crazy idea, there's certain people that will never ever give it to me because they'll just go, Christ, it's another crazy idea, right? I go, why do I keep asking these people for validation on that? Whereas there's other people that will go, oh my God, tell me about your crazy idea. How can we help you? There's other people that I go, I just need to be right now. I have nothing to give. Will you look after me for a bit? And they're really good at that. There's other people who I go, I'm in a bit of a pickle and I need someone to kick me up the butt right now. Or, you know, so it's kind of, everyone can't be everything for us. And I think what I've learned is that everyone that is around me is, I don't want this to sound horrible, is useful for something, but you know what I mean? It's like, if people are not helpful to me, they're not in my life, right? And that doesn't mean I use them. It's a give and take. Like, people who know me get stuff back as well. So I'm a help and I'm an entertainment and I'm a coach and I'm a, you know, giver and I'm a supporter of other people. But I got to the stage where I just had to go, like, if I'm in any kind of relationship where I'm giving way more than I'm receiving, I cannot do it. And it doesn't mean I shut that relationship off, but I'm very conscious, having burnt out a couple of times, of how much I give to others to my own detriment. So that's, you know, it has to be like, I'm really into this figure 8 thing at the moment. The giving and receiving has to be in balance like this. If we give and we don't receive, we're broke, burnt out and resentful. And if we receive without giving, then we're kind of selfish and greedy, and that's an imbalance in itself. So it's, how is the balance between giving and receiving? And having coached nurses, and some very senior nurses with very important jobs in the health service and small children, people will constantly ask you for more and more and more until you say no. So only you know what demands you've got on your time. And I used to say to these nurses, like, you've got all these 6 different people at work or departments asking you for stuff. None of them know what you're doing. Then you go home and you've got all these people asking. I'm like, you have to put your boundaries in place and say no. So this is slightly off the question, but I think the giving and receiving is vital. So we give and we receive. And sometimes I can only receive if I'm depressed, burnt out, fed up, or just need to rest. I'll just put some earphones in and lie on the sofa for 2 hours just staring at the ceiling because my brain's exhausted, right? Because I've learned that I need to rest way more than I thought I did. But there's also, like, if you're asking people for support, is it realistic that that person can give you the level or the type of support you want? So that's really what I've learned most about that.
Absolutely. That's really, really valuable.
I have the support, but what I've learned for myself, and I don't mean like we're all on our own and we're, you know, we've got to be an island and all this. It's like, I have to be responsible for myself, and unless I'm ill, right? If I'm mentally unwell, that's a that's a role I can't really play for myself. But if I'm not, then I have to, as an adult, be responsible. You know, first rule of personal development, take responsibility. And so I can run through patterns that still go through me of going, I want to be looked after. I want somebody to come and save me. I want to be, like, I get into the victim thing. I want to be rescued. I want to be this. I want to be that. And it doesn't stay around for long. And then I go, there's nobody coming to rescue you, Claire, right? You realize you're an adult, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, God. But it's also going, okay, so when I went into recovery, here's what I learned. I have to do my own recovery. I have to do the work every day to stay sober and to get well and to connect with, you know, source, or whatever you want to say it, like it's a spiritual practice that I did. I have to keep fit. I have to look at what I put in my body. I have to make a decision every minute not to have a drink, right? Until it gets to the stage where it's not difficult. But I don't have to do it on my own, right? So I have to do it, but there's a whole tribe of people that will help me through it. But I still have to do that every day. I still have to make those decisions for myself. And I think it's the same with everything. It's learning the balance between being too, as I used to call myself, pathologically independent. Like, I'm fine, I can manage, you know, martyr syndrome, to being sometimes a bit codependent, to going, okay, interdependence is what we're looking for. Like, I take full responsibility and I want you to take full responsibility, and I want it to be a give and receive relationship. Not always equal, because sometimes somebody needs more and the other person gives more, and sometimes it's the other way around. But if there's a massive imbalance, or you're constantly giving, or you're constantly receiving, or you're constantly resentful or burnt out, or just feeling like, where have I gone in all this, then you need to just look at where you're giving away your power, where you don't have firm boundaries, when you're maybe never say the word no to anyone that asks you to do them a favor, and know that ultimately, the stronger your boundaries are, actually you get a lot more respect from other people. And actually you start to respect yourself, because you go, right, what do I need in this moment? Do I need to be on another committee? Do I need to take any more overtime? Do I need to have this client who doesn't really light me up but has got the money? Do I really want to run another program online? Do I really want, like, whatever it is you're being asked to do, it's like, how does it feel? And this is where knowing yourself comes in. It's kind of, does it align with who you are? Is it in integrity with where you're going? Does it match where you want to be? And it's, you know, it's a kind of journey to learn what these answers are for you, because they'll be different to me, they'll be different to Christa, they'll be different to your parents, they'll be different to your brothers, they'll be different to your partners. You know, we all have different ways of working out and different ways of living our journey, if you like. But it's up to us to decide, like, how much of other people's crap do we take on, and how much do we actually ask for help? You know, I know one of my patterns when I'm feeling a bit down and a bit low is to isolate myself. And then I get to the stage where I go, I've got to start reaching out, because it gets worse and worse and worse. So even if it's on Zoom, you know, or going out for coffee or something, it's like, Claire, leave the house, right? Leave the house. You're beginning to turn into like some crazy woman, not talking to anyone. So it's, and I think this is where working with a coach can help, or just knowing yourself really well, because you can, after a while, you spot your patterns, because they're very boring and repetitive, and we play the same patterns until we learn not to. So I was saying, it's just valuable to have someone completely from outside that has done this work for a long time, that understands people, that knows some of the tools that can be used, and actually doesn't have a vested interest in what you decide to do, because people have all sorts of their own interests at play. So by all means, ask people, and then go, how do I feel about what they've said? Right? They're just opinions. They're their own opinions, and they're their own viewpoint. They're not necessarily true.
Absolutely. You know, one thing I wanted to ask you about as well, I'm really curious, is because we've touched on it a little bit today so far, that you've had, for you, there have been moments and have been things you've gone through that have, you could say, challenged you, but essentially have been opportunities for you to really get to know who you are as a person. So what was important to you, Claire, you know, outside of whoever was around you or whatever your job was, and so on and so forth. And so what I'm curious about as well is if there was ever a time and a point where that felt difficult to you. I mean, I can immediately think of a few that must have been, but it would be really interesting to hear, yeah, one, what were some of the times where things were difficult for you in terms of being able to connect with what was actually important for you?
Oh my God, twice a day.
Yeah, yeah.
Breakfast time and tea time and the bits in between. No. Yeah, and I think, yeah, I mean, if I look back on my life, I have had a really unusual and interesting and varied life. And I think I'm an interesting person because of it.
I would say so.
Some of the changes I've chosen, so I've chosen to change, and I've chosen to change my life. I've chosen to leap, or I've chosen to take drama classes or whatever. Some stuff has happened to me, and it's completely thrown me for a loop, you know, and we all have this, you know. By the time we reach adulthood, we will have bereavement, loss, relationship breakdowns. We might have been hit by a car, we've had redundancy, we've had a miscarriage or a pregnancy we didn't want, or we've had, like, you know, this stuff goes on when we're adults and we're living out in the world. And I think we have to be very mindful of this, certainly in the kind of industry that we work in, where we're encouraging people to be responsible for their life and to create their own, you know, existence and co-create and all this kind of stuff. And stuff is still going to happen that we didn't expect, right? But in a way, we can expect it, because sometimes, well, because it happens to everyone, right? And also, so I've had really difficult periods of burnout in my career, and I got through that with hobbies, and then I left. Even when I went when I was 34, 35, I went to study performing arts with a bunch of 19-year-olds at college, because I wanted to know whether that was my career or not. And much as I loved singing and I liked dancing and I liked learning, it was really difficult for me to be a 34-year-old at college. And also, because I didn't really, like, one minute I was a ward sister, the next minute I was a student, but I was 15 years older than everybody else, and everybody treated me like their mum, and it was just, like, really weird. So I loved certain aspects of it, and other bits were really difficult. And then my dad died very suddenly, and that was very difficult. And, you know, I lost everything in my life over an 18-month period because of my addiction. And even though I was a trained nurse and I was a coach and I've been a business person and an entrepreneur, I suddenly found myself not being able to sort my drinking out. And I was just like, oh shit, I'm really in trouble here. I'm really just trying everything except taking it seriously and getting proper help for 18 months. And in that time, I lost my driving license, my car, my career, my home, because I couldn't pay my mortgage, so I had to sell it. And I moved in to one of my sister's houses. So you talk about support. So I moved in with one of my sisters and lived in their kids' playroom. And I used to have this 2.5 bedroom apartment in Cheltenham and a job and a business. And I ended up living in my sister's playroom with nothing. So yeah, life has been very challenging. And ultimately but I think what I've learned from this, and I'm kind of having so then I went back online as a coach and was running my group for a couple of years. But really my self-care and my mental health was the most important thing to me. So even though I'll be running my group, by the time I feel frazzled at lunchtime, and I live by the sea, I'm going off for a walk this afternoon, I'm lying down, I'm watching a film, like, I've done 4 hours work today and actually I'm tired, so I'm going to replenish myself, right? I'm going to look after myself, I'm going to rest, and then I'm going to go to a recovery group, and then I'm going to make sure that, like, all this stuff that I need on a daily basis is really anchored in. And I still do a lot of it now. And then sort of last year, when I began to feel resentful with my clients, my business, my group, and I created it, so it's not their fault. So I'm going, okay, Claire, like, you have to draw a line under this and start again. And so that last 9 months has been actually really difficult. I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no income, like, I'm floating around. And then I couldn't pay my rent. And then, you know, the couple who owned the flat that I rented the room in Bournemouth were lovely, and my stuff's still in their garage, right? And I just gave them their room back and said, look, rent it to somebody else. I'm going off for an adventure. I don't really know where I'm going. And I came to stay with my mum for Christmas in December, and I'm still here, and it's April, because it's taken me that long until about 4 weeks ago, when I suddenly went, oh my God, like it's all clicked into place. Like I said, I've been working with this alignment mentor and really doing some more deep shifting and going, oh, I'm beginning to get it, like who I really am at a much different level than where I'd been operating before. And that's why I was a bit resentful, because I could feel that I wasn't operating at the level I wanted to, but I didn't know how to get there. So yeah, it's a really tough job, but life is tough anyway, sometimes in many ways, but at least I feel like I have control over it up to a point. Like I make my own decisions. I get up in the morning, I decide what I do with my time, you know, and that's an incredibly privileged position to be in. I understand that. So I was going to say something else then as well. Oh yes, so here's one of the main things I learned. So the same thing as recovery, I have to do the work, but I don't have to do it alone, right? So whether that's raising kids, running a business, you know, training in something, you know, training for a marathon, like whatever it is, you have to do the work, but don't do it alone. Like seriously, don't do it alone. And the other thing I've learned was when I was 3 years ago, I was living in a flat that I manifested by magic, really. And I couldn't really pay the rent, the benefits, or, you know, asking the government for help, wasn't really paying it. And I was kind of looking around myself going, God, I'm so broke and I'm so desperate, but I'm sober. So it was a miracle. How can I change this? And I went back online and I thought, I've got a smartphone, a Facebook account, some coaching skills, and I know how to run a business. And I literally started my business from there. Is that through going through all this that I've been through, and again, what I'm doing right now from the last 9 months is like, I can start an incredible thing from nothing. Like resources, not many, but if you've got the internet and you've got some, you know, skills, you can start to get out there, you can start to make money, you can start to change things. And I think that's what I've learned is like, you don't need a whole bunch of stuff or money or, you know, the sort of things we think we need to get to the next place in life. We actually don't. We need some time, we need some energy, and we need some focus, and we need some great intentions. But I think that's what I've learned more than anything, is that I can sit surrounded by almost nothing and make something out of it. And guess what? Going back to where we started at the beginning, when I was a little kid, I'd go, oh, I've had an idea. And I'd start with an idea and I'd create a show, or I'd create something of value, or I'd make something. So it's like the ability to make something from an idea or from an inkling is such a valuable one. And I think that's really where all my sort of difficulties have got me to, is I have to do it. I don't have to do it alone. And actually I can create magic from nothing. And I've been doing it my whole life.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. And, you know, so everything you've shared will be very valuable, but also specifically what you just said, you know, that, well, one, nothing is impossible. That's part of how I would put it. But two, each of us, we truly can create magic from what is seemingly nothing.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's always a way through and out of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Claire, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's been great.
It's been such an honor to speak with you. And I know you are truly one of those people we could literally speak for hours. I love that. And so thank you so much for your time and for everything. And, you know, and I'm truly excited to know that what you have shared and what you've spoken about will be a help and truly an inspiration for others. So thank you once again. And, you know, and with that in mind, if there are people watching and listening and they're thinking to themselves or starting to feel that, you know, they would like a bit of support, or even, you know, if they're just curious about you and more about what you do, how can they find out? How can they get in contact with you and you know, maybe share a bit more of what you can do and what you do for your business?
Yeah, sure. So the best place to find me at the moment, unless something radical happens with Facebook in the next few months, and who knows, is on Facebook. So you can find me at the Seaside CEO on Facebook, and also as Claire Westwood. I have a group that's currently called Luminary Living, which is mainly for individuals who are already like out in the world running some kind of mission-led business, let's call it that. It's not so much for people transitioning out of work. I don't really do that kind of work anymore. I've got people in there who are designers and artists and work with horses, like anything that's based on your passion, where you just go, I just need a bit of energy, I need a bit of understanding, like I've got so far on my own, but I'm really needing to refine it. Or what we've found, we've talked about a lot, and I know that some of the other people in your interviews have, it's like we evolve out of it. We create something, we get really good at it, then we get bored with it, or we know we've evolved out of it. We have to recreate our life and our business around the new us. And so that's kind of what I do now, is I work with individuals who are living their passion and making a positive difference in the world with a service-based business. And actually they've got to a stage where they go, I want to reformulate, I want to streamline, I want to have a bit more time for me, I want to have a bit more fun, a bit more play, a bit more creativity. And I actually need to tweak not just my business but my life, and it's all around like who you truly are as an individual. So all my work is based around like my clients' individuality and who they really are and what they're drawn to. So that's what we always go back to. And I run programs, you know, a free challenge at the moment on manifesting, and then obviously when this goes out it may be something different. So yeah, so you can find me the Seaside CEO or my group Luminary Living. And if you're a mission-led entrepreneur, then come and join us. If you're in corporate and wanting to come out, then there's other people who would be more suitable to help you. But there's great resources. I do interviews and live streams and all sorts of stuff on my page, which are basically, you know, suitable for anybody to be immersed in and energized and motivated by. They're very, very kind of broad range of topics on my page. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And, you know, for all the viewers and listeners, as ever, again, I will, you'll see our talk today on the website, transformationallifeseries.com. I'm sharing all of these talks and videos on my YouTube channel, as well as Facebook. Claire and all the speakers will be sharing it with all of, you know, their audience as well. So you'll be getting this in multiple places. And on the website also, underneath Claire's name, as with all the speakers, but for today, so underneath Claire's name, you'll see her, you know, brief biography, a bit more about her. You'll see the video. You'll also see, and I'll make sure you have links. And so all the ways she's mentioned here today that you can get in touch with and contact her, that will be there for you as well. So thank you. Thank you so much, Claire.
You're welcome.
Excited. This has been such a gift. All the best.
Thank you.
Take care. And thank you again, everyone. Lots of love. Bye.
I'll live for the good days, I'll dream of the great nights, I'll live for the ones I lost. Slide is up, we gonna meet in the afterlife. It's all sacrifice, I got the appetite to be a better man, let's unite. My story like a motion picture, bittersweet like shots of liquor. Let me take the pain, my skin is thicker, we one blood. I'm not pulling triggers, it's all love. And yo, here's the kicker, we working hard, we never go diggers.